All right, to get things kicking off here, what I'm going to be talking about is degradation of the visitor experiences at national parks. As we move in, I just kind of want to give you a brief overview because this is such a hefty topic and there's a lot of stuff that go into it. I know we're not supposed to read off, but I want to read off what I kind of gathered of what degradation is, and it's the degradation of the visitor experience to national parks can simply be explained as putting an enormous amount of stress on local land across the country. So those are going to be your national parks, obviously, that see a lot of visitors each and every year, continuously coming back. You know, everyone wants to get out and experience the beautiful nature, which nobody really should complain about because it is beautiful. But one thing too, it is a global problem around the country. Obviously, I'm going to focus more on the United States, but it's fair to acknowledge that this is happening everywhere. It's not just a us problem here in America. The next thing is tourism is one of the largest industries. If you look a little bit down, it can just show you how big of an impact tourism, especially to the national parks, is to the U.S. economy. So it does show that national park visitor spending contributed about $28.6 billion to the U.S. economy in 2020. So that just shows you how big of a number that is. And then if you look over to, I have another cool slide that we're going to look at on the next slide. Actually, it's a graph. It's a line graph that shows kind of the numbers of people visiting these parks. 2015-16, we were really skyrocketing a lot of it. We are kind of hitting a plateau. It has decreased in 2020 with COVID and stuff, but I imagine those numbers are going to shoot right back up. But the one thing too I really want to focus on is different types of tourists create different problems. So the first tourist I want to talk about is a soft eco-tourist. Their knowledge isn't as deep as one of the other one we're going to talk about, which is a hard eco-tourist. But basically what that means is they prefer to be accommodated a little bit, eating and dining in. They prefer toilets, driving, parking lots, stuff like that. One of the ways they really impact is they create a lot of pollution. Like I said, they like to drive. Physical impacts to the land, like erosion with we're making new buildings, we're creating bathrooms, we're creating those buildings that they can be accommodated in, so they're not necessarily in the nitty-gritty of the actual nature. And then as we move into the other type of tourist, I want to talk about a hard eco-tourist. They kind of have a richer, deep connection with the outdoors, obviously. They like to enhance their resources and benefit from them. But like I said, they both have positives and negatives. The negative with this one is they're going to depletion of natural resources. Obviously, they're going to be out and they're going to be taking advantage of those. So when they're out there doing that, they are going to be, like I said, using those natural resources. And a physical impact, they're obviously more connected with nature. So sometimes they might venture off trail, do some of that stuff, get more involved in nature, which can be a negative thing for the environment around. But they also do not cause as much pollution, so that's a positive from a hard eco-tourist. And then with all of this going on, we tend to add a lot of problems which degrade the experiences of the beautiful parks, and we'll kind of get into that on the next slide. Moving into this next slide, I want to talk about how humans have impacted this problem or even how we've made this problem worse. There are three main things that tourists have done to degrade the visitor experience throughout national parks every year across our lovely country. First, depletion of natural resources. 2, creating pollution. 3, physical impacts to the land. I kind of want to break these down a little bit with you guys. First things first, we'll talk about depletion of natural resources. That's going to be cutting down trees, overcrowding, which can create overflowing of sewage, pollute fresh water, stuff like that, and obviously erosion of these materials. This is going to provoke changes in the ecosystem. Next, I want to talk about create pollution, boating. Yellowstone's big for snowmobiling. A lot of those are creating bad emission for the environment. As you can see in this graph, down to the bottom right, you can see the impacts of two-stroke exhaust compared to four-stroke exhaust. This is big, looking at this stuff when you're trying to figure out a way to fix this, or how we can make an adjustment and try to slow our emission levels there. But you can definitely see differences and kind of what's worse and what's better. But another way you can look at that too is we got airplanes, stuff like that. And soundscape degradation is actually pretty bad all over. That's going to be your airplanes, human voices, stuff like that. And what's crazy about that is I had no idea, but I guess that really affects the migration patterns of animals, how they act, where they live, a bunch of that stuff. Moving on to the next one is the physical impacts to the land. More people, more foot traffic. I really like that picture in the bottom left. Are we loving nature to death? Like I said, as the parks kind of come to a rise in people, as you can see on that line graph right next to it there, we do have the red line there indicates annual park visitors, and then the full-time employees is the blue. So it just shows you how impactful how many people are coming to each national park all the time. So it's like you look at that as, are we having too many interactions with these parks, creating the erosion? Like I know in Zion, as we're going to touch on a little bit later, gets a lot of foot traffic, and then mixed with the weathering patterns, stuff like that, you're going to start to see the destructive force of erosion act even faster upon those sediments and that stuff. All right, this next slide, we're going to try to hurry it up a little bit so we can stay on track for time, but we're going to talk about impacts on national parks. Basically just some examples to solidify what we talked about earlier. That first one going to be Yosemite, the soundscape too, the pollution there. Sounds are an integral part of visitors' Yosemite experience. Listening to water flow or wildlife vocalize can be degraded by inappropriate sounds or sound levels. And those sound levels are really important to those animals for their behavior, particularly in mating, locating prey, basically just a lot of communication purposes from that side. Next, we're going to move on to Zion National Park. Zion is one of those parks that's heavily visited every year. I think 4.3 million visitors came to Zion in their most recent year, which is definitely one of the most visited. Although money is good, the erosion with all this foot traffic is not good. As you can see in that picture, with the national park, you're going to have to build roads so people can get there. Roads, more foot traffic, trails, all that stuff does help in the process of erosion, which speeding it up is not the best thing. So there's actually been certain instances where they do shut down trails, which is pretty crazy. Next, we're going to move into Yellowstone National Park. Snowmobile pollution is what I want to focus on mainly. As we looked at earlier, the emissions of 2- and 4-stroke gas. 2-stroke, obviously, you're going to have more toxic emissions than 4-stroke. And actually, I did look it up, and more snowmobiles are actually 2-stroke than 4-stroke as of right now. Another thing, too, to look at is the sound levels those snowmobiles put off, the echoes it puts off the mountain. Moving on to the next one, how we can resolve this. I wish I had a little bit more time so I could really get into what exactly I wish we could do. This isn't really a secret, though. A lot of people know about it. A lot of people have put a lot of time and thought into what goes on here. And as a kind of a country, I put some things down. We can put some laws, government contributions, regulation, management planning's huge. Just figuring out really what to do, where to do it. Say we're losing trees here, we got to plant some stuff here. We got to get workers, we got to get funds, stuff like that. It's a big thing for just keeping everything in order, as well as we just got to maintain the land. So we're not seeing those erosion factors, all that kind of thing. But things ordinary, everyday citizens can do, so I want to focus on a little bit more, raise awareness, obviously, as you get out to those national parks. And if you see someone acting a certain way, I think it's appropriate to let them kind of know in the nicest way possible. Help them gain awareness for what's going on, and how we need to do our part. donations to fund renovations, like I said, for that management planning. If you have money to donate to help sustain these wildlife so that our kids can see these beautiful wonders of the world. Last, be considerate, thoughtful, and conscious when entering national parks or wilderness areas. We don't need to litter. We don't need to do anything crazy. We don't need to dump a bunch of gas everywhere to get a fire going, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I think the biggest thing is just be conscious of what we're doing and how we're going about things. All right, in closing here, I just want to touch on a couple of those main points one more time. And what is degradation of the visitor experience? Really, that's anything that's going to degrade an experience. If that's your soundscaping, if that's scenery, just really anything with that puts enormous amount of stress on local land across the country, as we mentioned earlier. How do we make the problems worse? Depletion of natural resources. We're creating a lot of pollution and physical impacts to the land. Impacts of degradation of the visitor experience on national parks, as we touched on, Yosemite with the soundscaping, Zion National Park with the bad erosion, Yellowstone National Park with the automobiles, snowmobiles, stuff like that. And of course, Glacial National Park with the pollution, overcrowding, and really the tribal stuff out there. That was pretty crazy. How can we fix or minimize these issues, though? As we touched on, we can raise awareness, we can be considerate, thoughtful, conscious, and develop management planning teams so we can get everything sorted out there. But really what I think it comes down to is we need to take action now that we know the right steps to perform what we can do and minimize those harmful effects. We need to take responsibility for our actions, and we need to take ownership for our actions as well, just so we can protect our national parks and we can recreate the beauty of each of these national parks. And with that all being said, I hope I did a good enough job of kind of explaining degradation of the visitor experience of national parks, and I hope that we can work together to make a safer, more reliable, and sustainable future for our national parks. And I just want to say thank you for watching, and if I can help you out with anything or if you have any questions, just give me a holler. Thank you.